All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Thursday again, everybody. We are live on AMP, so if you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast feeds, don't forget that AMP is the very first place that you guys can get these shows. Let's take a break from looking back into NBA history and talk about some actual meaningful basketball taking place right now as we are, I think the first set of games are tomorrow. I think the USA plays on Saturday, but we're heading into the FIBA World Cup, and a lot of our favorite NBA players are playing in it. And we have a very interesting Team USA team this year. So we're going to do a deep dive kind of into previewing this tournament. Heavy focus on Team USA. Brief mentions of some of the other teams around the world. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Volume's YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. And last but not least, if for whatever reason you miss one of these videos and you can't get back over to YouTube to finish, don't forget you can find them wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. All right, let's talk some basketball. So to give you guys an idea, we're not going to cover every single game, but I do plan on doing a few videos during the World Cup to cover it. I personally find it very interesting as a basketball fan. I would imagine the kind of people that would like my show probably are excited for this tournament as well. And we've been pining for some basketball, and I think this is a nice little appetizer before we head into a very exciting NBA season. So Team USA went 5-0 in their exhibitions. They did trail in the second half of 2 of their games, so they're certainly beatable. But they have looked really good down the stretch in those 2 particular games and blew everybody else out. So they have looked impressive so far. The starting lineup has been the least impressive group that the team has run out there. The starting lineup they've been going with is Jalen Brunson with Brandon Ingram, Jaren Jackson, Anthony Edwards, and Mikal Bridges. And this to me is a great example of the concept of diminishing returns that I talk about a lot on this show. So the example most recently that I've been using with you guys is the idea of Bradley Beal joining the Phoenix Suns. You know, in a vacuum, in a team like on Washington, where I need a guy to create shots, break down the defense, basically be my offensive engine, I'd rather have a guy like Bradley Beal than a guy like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, right? Because just if I ask Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to run 1,000 pick and rolls, 300 ISOs, and 150 post-ups, like he's just not going to be nearly as efficient generating shots for his team the way that Bradley Beal can do, right? But in a situation like the Phoenix Suns, where I've already got Kevin Durant and Devin Booker on the team, I don't need him to run 1,000 pick and rolls. I don't need him to run 300 ISOs and 150 post-ups. I need him to do some of that stuff, but for the most part, it's going to be a lot of like guarding on the perimeter, crackdown rebounding from the perimeter, running your lane in transition, taking and making spot-up threes, driving closeouts, second side creation, a lot of like supporting role type of stuff. Because if I have Bradley Beal run 1,000 pick and rolls, 300 ISOs, and 150 post-ups, that's taking touches away from better players in Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. So that's kind of the general concept of diminishing returns. And you see a lot of that with this Team USA starting lineup. Because the way I see it, there are basically like 2 general styles of offensive basketball. There's like ball player movement basketball, which is like really quick decisions. The ball never sticks in one place for more than a second or 2. Nobody really takes a tough off the dribble shot unless it's an end of the shot clock situation. And everyone's just driving and kicking and driving and kicking, trying to get a wide open layup or a wide open 3. That's like ball player movement offense, right? Then there's brute force offense. Brute force offense is like, we've got the best guy. Let's give him the ball. Let's create a good amount of space for him to operate, or give him a screen or something to help him get to a specific matchup he wants. And then let's give him space to cook, right? And there's values in both styles. I think a lot of times you'll see some coaches even be like, oh, why are we doing this brute force type of deal? And especially in the lower levels, you'll see that a lot in college basketball as well. And what they don't realize, those specific coaches, is that when the game just degenerates at the end of games and the defenses are super locked in, the refs are swallowing their whistles and letting a lot of guys get away with fouls. They've seen your sets all game, so they're in front of your sets. You need a guy who can just, do what Anthony Edwards has been doing for the Team USA, and like backing his man down in the post and taking tough fadeaway jump shots over his right shoulder, or taking tough pull-up threes off the bounce. Like, there's an important spot in the game for that style, but you don't want to do it all game. You want to ideally avoid it as much as possible. unless you're in a late clock situation or you're at the end of a game, right? And the problem is the starters for Team USA, they like to play brute force basketball with a lineup that doesn't make a ton of sense to do it. There's a redundancy in having Brandon Ingram, a guy who's used to conserving energy on defense and kind of resting off the ball because he has such a massive offensive responsibility, right? Same thing with Jalen Brunson. He's used to having the ball in his hands, having to make a ton of decisions for the Knicks, and then he conserves some energy on the defensive end and conserves some energy off the ball, right? You guys know how highly I value Jalen Brunson and Brandon Ingram. Both of those guys were in my top 25 players this year. I view those guys extremely highly. But within this context, it's different. And this is, it's funny, as I've done my player rankings, I've had a lot of people be like, why are you overvaluing team accomplishments? Like, this player's really good. If you put him in that situation, he'd be great. Yeah, but it's not an individual sport. Basketball is a team sport. So whatever we want to say about individual players, Jalen Brunson and Brandon Ingram are clearly the second and third best players on the team, right? Behind Anthony Edwards. But for whatever reason, in the flow of this basketball team, it's not working super well. And that's because a team of basketball players, a group of 5 basketball players in a lineup, is a very complicated living organism. And you're not just the sum of your parts there. You're actually about fulfilling responsibilities on the floor. And you've got 3 guys that love to fill the same responsibility and aren't great in other situations. And so then when they go to the bench and Tyrese Halliburton comes in and he starts making super quick decisions and the ball's popping around, and guys like Mikal Bridges and Austin Reeves, Mikal plays with the starters, but Kerr and Spoelstra have been leaning super heavy on him in minutes, so he's been playing a lot with the bench groups as well. But guys like Mikal Bridges and Austin Reeves, Mikal, before he went to Brooklyn, is used to being a guy who's just spotting up and attacking closeouts. Austin Reeves took on a bigger on-ball responsibility with the Lakers at the end of the year, but he's used to playing off of LeBron James, and for a year and a half before that, he was primarily an off-ball player. So those guys are comfortable playing in that style of basketball. They're used to not conserving energy, but rather diverting most of their energy towards the defensive end and in the dirty work of the game. And so the bench unit just seems to flow better, and it's more fluid offensively, and they've got Josh Hart out there sometimes too, and he plays a similar style. And Paolo Banchero's doing a really nice job just playing his ass off as a backup center. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But that bench group is just playing better, and they're erasing deficits, and they're building leads. Tyrese Halliburton was a plus 17 versus Germany. Jalen Brunson was plus 5, and Brandon Ingram was plus 1. So that kind of gives you an idea of just how much more successful on the scoreboard the bench group has looked for the most part. But here's the thing. You guys know I think Steve Kerr and Eric Spoelstra are the 2 best coaches in the world. And they see all of this stuff. And you could tell they made all of the necessary adjustments in that Germany game in the second half. Germany led by 9 with about 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. They also led by about 13 with a few minutes left in the third quarter as well. And Steve Kerr and Eric Spoelstra ended up closing with a more sensical group of guys. It was Anthony Edwards with Austin Reeves and Mikal Bridges, 2 great off-ball players. Jaren Jackson is their defensive fulcrum at the center position. And then he went with either Tyrese Halliburton or Bobby Portis in the closing group, depending on what the size, because Germany was playing 2 centers and crashing the glass a lot, so they had some issues there. And obviously, if you go, Ant, Reeves, Halliburton, that's a somewhat smaller 1, 2, 3, right? So obviously they can go bigger when they need to by playing Bobby Portis the way they did, or I even think they could get away with playing Paolo Banchero in the closing group, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But they played much better down the stretch of that game. They got a ton of stops. They switched. When Tyrese Halliburton came in the mid-third quarter, they played that fluid offense as they shrunk the lead from 13 down to something more manageable, even against some of Germany's starting lineup players. And then Anthony Edwards kind of took over the game late as more of a brute force style when it made sense. And honestly, it could have been better than it was because they were kind of locked up at 86 there for a while, and Ant was doing a really nice job drawing multiple defenders and making kick-out passes, and they generated like back-to-back-to-back wide open threes on the left wing on the backside that they missed, just happened to miss from good shooters. I think Mikal Bridges missed 1, 2. Bobby Portis missed a wide open catch-and-shoot corner 3. But then finally Mikal Bridges made one, and because they were getting stops during that whole time, all of a sudden they're up 3, and then the lead grows, and they end up winning 99-91. So I thought it was super interesting. They actually closed that game on a 22-5 run, and like I said, if they would have shot better, it could have been even better from there. So I think Steve Kerr and Eric Spoelstra have got a good feel for this team now after the 5 exhibition games. And this is kind of what I put down. This is for my, I've watched probably 3.5 of the 5 games that they played. And here's what I've kind of picked up from this team. Anthony Edwards is clearly the best player. And he's the guy that when they go brute force style, they have to run through Ant. In the starting lineup, it's kind of like your turn, my turn. It's like Jalen, and then it's Brandon, and then it's Ant, and then it's Brandon, and then it's Jalen. And you could just tell none of the 3 of them are really getting in a great rhythm. And so it's redundant, and there's some diminishing returns there. But when Ant is actually the focal point of the offense, he's been fantastic. He's got a 57% true shooting percentage so far in these 5 games. He's shooting 50% effective field goal percentage on pull-up jump shots, which is obviously amazing. 81% at the rim, 1.17 points per possession in pick and roll so far, 1.05 points per possession in ISO, and then he's only run 2 post-ups, but he scored 2 points. So he's up over a point per possession in all 3 static half-court shot creation situations, and he's playing excellent defense. So it makes sense for him to be the fulcrum. Jalen Brunson has played really well too, and if you look at his shot making and his static creation stuff, it's been great, but he hasn't been nearly as good defensively as Ant. It's actually been a little bit of a problem how much dribble penetration he's giving up. So like it's with how well Tyrese Halliburton's playing with the bench group, I think you actually have to close with Jalen Brunson on the bench the way that they did, but I'll kind of get to that here in a minute. Ingram just isn't playing super well. He's 14 for 33 from the field so far. He's shooting really well in catch and shoot situations, but he's missing just about anything else. I think he needs to he's the biggest guy that needs to make an adjustment for this team to have a chance to win the gold medal. I would have Brandon Ingram adopt more of a Mikal Bridges play style. Way fewer on-ball reps, primarily focusing on defense and rebounding, which that starting group is struggling a little bit with rebounding. And then prioritize being a spot-up player, taking and making catch-and-shoot threes and driving closeouts. If he kind of embraces more of a Mikal Bridges role, I think he becomes the perfect slot in with that closing group. Instead of having to go with Tyrese Halliburton or Bobby Portis or Paolo Banchero, then you can close with Ingram and Mikal Bridges next to each other. But if Brandon Ingram wants to not commit to the defensive end and just take a bunch of tough off-the-dribble jump shots, which right now he's not making, even though we know he can make them when he's the focal point of an offense, when he's in a Pelicans jersey, right? If he can't figure that out, I think you might have to go away from him in the closing group. But ideally, you want Ingram to slot into that role. Anthony Edwards is clearly the guy. Like I said, Steve Kerr specifically said that. I don't think it's a coincidence that I had Anthony Edwards as the highest player on Team USA in my player rankings this year at number 15. I continue to just be completely impressed by him. I'm becoming a huge fan of his game and his overall attitude and competitiveness. I think he's poised for a ridiculous season. You guys will see this in my season previews, which we're a couple weeks away from when I start going through teams. Like, I think Minnesota, especially if they can figure out what to do with Karl Towns, if you give me Anthony Edwards with Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert, and I'm getting a ton of stops, and I have that dude, Anthony Edwards, the alpha dog, I like my chances as a basketball team to win a lot of games and to make some noise in the playoffs. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. The biggest thing that stood out to me from that closing group is Austin Reeves simply has to close with this group. He simplifies the pecking order of decision-making. Austin Reeves is the guy I would basically replace Jalen Brunson with in the starting line, or not in the starting lineup. I think you should start with Jalen Brunson because of the politics of it and the egos at play. You start Jalen Brunson, but you give him a quick pull, and then you close with Austin Reeves. Why? Simplifies decision-making, gets the ball out of his hands and gets the ball in Anthony Edwards' hands instead of Anthony Edwards and Jalen Brunson basically playing tug of war over who controls possessions. Austin Reeves kind of simplifies that process. He's a dead-eye spot-up player. He's converted 15 spot-up possessions into 24 points. Think about how insane that is. That's 1.6 points per possession. He's 8 for 12 on catch-and-shoot threes. So you can't leave him open. He's going to make it every single time. If you chase him off the line, he's going to make the right play, and he's not going to force a shot unless he has to at the end of the shot clock, which makes him the perfect guy to put at the end of a lineup like this. At the fifth guy in a four-man, when you have 4 other really talented players, Austin makes a ton of sense. And he can create his own shot if he needs to in a pinch. He's run 15 pick and rolls, resulting in 18 points, which is really good. And he's holding his own when teams target him on defense. Teams have tried to post him up as a mismatch 5 times, and he's only given up 4 points, including forcing 2 turnovers. He had a really nice strip against Germany in their last game. I just think he's the perfect guy in that lineup. That's why you see it in the scoreboard. That's why they're winning all their minutes with Austin Reeves on the floor by a lot. And that's why Steve Kerr, the best coach in the world, went with him in the closing lineup. I think they need to continue to do that. Mikal Bridges still has to close. He's been awesome. He's defending super well. He's kind of been like their dirty work guy on the perimeter. He's shooting 67% effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot jump shots. That's awesome. He's kind of like their Swiss Army knife in that group. I think he makes a ton of sense. Obviously, Jaren Jackson has been holding down the rim. They've done a really nice job. They did it against Germany. Again, 22-5 run over a 7-minute span. That goes to show you just how good their defense can be when they really, really lock in, because Jaren Jackson's such a gifted rim protector, and the guys in that lineup are doing their job, chasing guys over the top of screens and funneling them into Jaren Jackson. Again, if we got Jaren Jackson, Mikal Bridges, Austin Reeves, and Anthony Edwards. That fifth guy is the guy that's kind of up in the air. Again, if Ingram is locked in on the details, I think you close with Ingram. He's a better player. He has the tools to be a really impactful defensive player. Yeah, I go with Ingram. But if Ingram is not focused on those things and he's in his feelings about how he's not getting as much touches as he deserves, that's when you make a move to somebody different. If you can get away with going small, depending on the matchup, I like Tyrese Halliburton. Dead-eye catch and shoot shooter, really good ball mover, makes a ton of sense there. If you have to go big, Paolo or Bobby Portis represent interesting options. I wanted to quick shout out Paolo Banchero. I've been super impressed by him in these exhibitions, just with how hard he's playing. He's still a whole bull in a china shop on the offensive end of the floor, just kind of seems like a little bit rushed and is struggling to kind of identify what he should do in that role. But on the defensive end and rebounding, I've actually been really impressed with him, and I kind of keep seeing this like potential for small ball center with Paolo Banchero. I remember when I watched him in Summer League the first time, his size was what flashed to me the most as I was watching him play in person. He is absolutely huge, and he is capable of holding down a lineup as a backup center, and I think that's a really interesting thing for a potential future Orlando Magic group that could run out lineups with a bunch of dudes who are between 6'8" and 6'11" that can dribble, shoot, and pass, but also can defend. So that's super, super exciting. So essentially the pathway of the game, I'd stick with your existing starters, right? Stick with Brunson and Ingram, with Mikal Bridges, Anthony Edwards, and Jaren Jackson. Quick plugs on Jalen Brunson and Brandon Ingram if they're not playing any defense. Obviously, ride your bench groups longer. I'd stretch those units out longer. And then in the closing group, you move Austin Reeves into it. And then if Brandon Ingram's not playing well, you slot someone else in there. Now, would I pick Team USA to win the World Cup this year? I think it makes a ton of sense that USA is the favorite. And if I had to pick one team, I certainly would pick USA to win. But if I had to choose, kind of like the old Tiger Woods question, if I had to choose between Tiger Woods and the field, or in this case, if I had to choose between Team USA and the field, I'd pick the field. I don't think Team USA is good enough to blow teams out. And that means they're going to be in close games. And there are some other really good players in this tournament that if they end up in a close game with Team USA can out-execute them. Like Canada. Canada has Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who in my opinion, I had him at 13th in my player rankings. I think he's better than anybody on Team USA. Ant is very close, and Ant could outplay him, but SGA is at least at that level, if not a little bit higher. They have Dylan Brooks, RJ Barrett, and Lou Dort, all guys who are outstanding perimeter defenders. RJ Barrett's having a really impressive international play sequence here, just beating people off the dribble and finishing with his left hand at the rim. They had a really impressive game in a overtime win against Germany. At least I think it was overtime. But it was a really, really close game I watched between Germany and Canada, where RJ Barrett basically took over the game down the stretch. And then they have Kelly Olynyk as like a floor spacer. They're a flawed team because they, like, guys like Lou Dort and Dylan Brooks can't shoot, and RJ Barrett's somewhat inconsistent as a shooter, so they can go really cold offensively for a while. So I would not pick them to win. I'd pick USA to win. But yeah, if you're in a dogfight against Team USA, there's absolutely a chance that Dylan Brooks and RJ Barrett and Lou Dort could lock in on defense, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander could make a bunch of big plays offensively down the stretch and beat a USA team in an elimination game. So that's a team that's a threat. France has Rudy Gobert and Evan Fournier. Obviously, a bad shooting game from Team USA where they're all over-penetrating into Rudy Gobert could be a problem if Fournier makes some shots. Australia has Josh Giddey and Patty Mills and Matisse Thybulle. They did lose Jock Landale, which severely hurts their chances. He had an ankle injury, but they still have a puncher's chance. And then Slovenia, like Luka's having an awesome sequence here. He's just absolutely flambeing everybody in the post. He's got 22 points on 13 post-ups so far this summer. 1.12 points per possession in ISO, 56% effective field goal percentage on pull-up jump shots. He's playing super well. I wouldn't want to face him in an elimination game. So again, like I'd pick the U.S. in any of those matchups, but they're not good enough to blow those teams out. And you get a couple of close games, all it takes is one of them going the wrong way. So USA should be the favorite. I'm going to pick them to win the tournament, but given the choice between the U.S. and the field, I think the field is a safer bet. So we'll touch base in about a week after some of the pool play as we head into elimination play from there. But as for today, that's all I have. I will be back tomorrow with a continuation of our top 25 players of the last 25 years.